Anderson Show. I am so thrilled you are here. Thank you for joining me. And for joining, we've got a special guest coming along a little bit later. But this podcast, if you don't know already, if you're a new member or a new listener, this podcast is all about being able to tap into the expertise and knowledge of women who have B2B thought leadership consulting and advisory practices and who are working, have the solo consulting practice, and they're growing their practice. And so the purpose of this podcast is to be able to go a little bit behind the scenes and to be able to go and get in there behind and see, well, let's look under the bonnet and see, what is it like to really run a practice like this? How are these people getting clients? What are the secrets to their success? What are the things they're doing to grow their practice? So welcome. I hope that you enjoy the show today. A couple of things that I thought I would share that I'm noticing. It's the end of 2024. We're coming into 2025. And this last quarter, I've been doing a lot of work in preparing the clients I'm working with ready for next year. We've been really looking at reflections from 2024 here in Australia. It's been a pretty tough year. And it's been a year that the speaking gigs have been down for anyone that's not an AI speaker or a futurist, but particularly in the AI space. If you've been an AI speaker, and I coach a few AI experts, they have been very busy. For the others, though, there's still topics that are still there: resilience, change, leadership. All those categories are still there. What it is, though, is that this year has been very competitive. There's been a lot of new people come into the market, particularly in the speaking space, for those who are prepared to take the leap around their thought leadership. They're definitely investing and getting a return out of that thought leadership by not just focusing on speaking, but diversifying their income and looking at the different revenue streams. For example, I had Dr. Louise Marler just this week. We did a big event in Melbourne, so we had almost 100 people at that event. And so for those sorts of practices, we've looked at different ways to be able to find easy ways for clients to work with experts that I'm working with, particularly if budgets have been cut. So whether it's speaking budgets, big meetings have not necessarily gone ahead, training budgets have been cut. I've had people complaining that they're being ghosted when they're trying to call people, but you've got to be really easy to buy. So you've got to find ways to still help people, but maybe you need to think a little laterally. Maybe it's time to think about public events and to think about the old metrics that I used to use. I think they're still valid, but I've had to really look at some of the sacred cows that are typically in practices and take each one on its merit, and to be able to take some gambles and pull some big things off this year that have really paid off for people. Things to think about. I've been running events. I ran Focus 25 this quarter, which was about preparing people for 2025. If you look at the research that's coming into next year, business confidence is high. It's the highest it's been for some time. CEO confidence is high. There's a big focus on return on investment. So people they're not just, even though confidence is high, they're not going to be spending willy-nilly. They're going to be still investing, but they really want to be clear about that return on investment for the organization. So cost management will still be under scrutiny. It's not that they're not spending, but they're looking for good value for money, not just value for money, but ROI. Business growth confidence is there. So that's a good sign. In Australia, we need a couple of interest rate cuts to make that really a little more sustainable. But if you're in this space coming into 2025, I'd really encourage you. And saying to my community, I'm saying this year is the year of ROI. If you haven't got your metrics clear this year in your collateral, websites, landing pages, brochures, white papers, all those types of things, and if you're not measuring and tracking the results, therefore the client's going to struggle to see the value next year. So really, this is the time to tighten up on your metrics, tighten up on your ROI, and make sure that's really nice and clear coming into 2025. So having said all that, let's have a chat about our guest today. So our guest today is Leonie McCarthy. She's a powerhouse in retail transformation. She's the owner of a business called 6R Retail, and she has a real knack for making complex tech implementation work well. And she's all about combining interesting work with great people. So she has over 2 decades of experience across ERP, PIM, e-commerce, and more. Leonie has become the go-to expert for turning technology into real business advantage. Join me today. Thank you for coming today. And we're going to talk to Leonie about building momentum, leading change, empowering teams, and technology as more than just a support function, and what she's done to be able to grow her practice. So, welcome, Leonie. All right. Welcome, Leonie. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Jane. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Leonie, you have had your practice for some time. You have a really interesting niche that you work in. Are you happy to share a bit about your practice, how it works, type of clients that you work with?
Yeah, of course. It came about. My practice actually came about because I inherited the business from the woman who I was working for, and she was taking on a role in one of our clients actually, and so she was happy to pass the business off to me, and it has clearly evolved once one person in a small business, once one person takes it over, it evolved. It started out with a very merchandise planning kind of a focus, and it's now much more of a project and team building leadership kind of practice. So when I say practice, your definition of practice is a little more evolved perhaps than mine, in that I still have a foot in the contracting world as well as the consulting, and so I sort of move between both of those places depending on what's required for the client. Yeah. Oh, and sorry, pardon me. You asked me who I help, which I completely forgot to answer. Sorry. So mainly I work with retail businesses, and that's sort of basically born out of the fact that I grew up in retail. I worked in fashion for a long time. People find that very hard to believe when they meet me now. But that delight in the simplicity of the customer experience, I think, is definitely something that I've carried through the entire way. And I think the other part that I would credit sort of the early career stuff to is that idea of end-to-end process. And so I'm very focused on helping people with end-to-end process. And so when we engage with businesses around technology projects, we're looking at not just the technology part of the implementation, but also what's going on in the team, and how will they change and adapt and move their processes along with the technology changes that are coming.
This is interesting. You and I both come from a retail background, so we know, when you're on that shop floor, you're the person who's facing the customer. If all these decisions that have gone on, in the background, you're the one facing the customer and copying the brunt of it if it's not right. But 100%. You can really elevate and optimize your revenue if it's done really well. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And so much of that is I think very interpersonal and small elements of just putting yourself in the customer's shoes.
It's interesting. I was reading an article this morning that came out from HBR, and it was something like only 35% or 32% of projects are actually successful. What do you think makes, there's so many elements that must make a project successful in your world when you're working with clients. What do you say that entails?
So it is a really great question, Jane, because so much of success, like when you talk about traditional project measures, they often measure success on, scope, time, budget, those kinds of things. And yes, those things are important, but so much more than just that creates success in a business. So when we first engage with clients, we start out with conversations about what do we think success looks like, and we try to get to a point where we've got some tangible things that we can say, yes, when we're there, we'll know that we've been successful. We have one client who did a very express version of an ERP implementation, and their version of success was, if we can get down to less than 10 Google Sheets that we're managing between departments, we will call that success.
Right.
So, that's like, sometimes it's really sort of, it sounds really mundane, but behind, and when you talk about systems that are supporting the people in the coal face, behind almost every business, there'll be parts of the business that function really well and have got great systems and things work nicely. And then there'll be parts of the business where it's held together with, a horrible spreadsheet and, some person having to do downloads, uploads, and manipulating data.
Ouch. That sounds painful. Thank
Yeah,
God
a
for
little bit.
people like you, because you've worked with, I mean, the retailers you've worked with are some of the most recognizable brands that, we would see walking,
Yeah.
through a shopping center, and fashion brands that we all know and
Mhm.
love. Um, I'm thinking that the pressure that they're under, we talk a bit about the type of, knowing these specific markets and specific industries and the pressure they're under. What are some of the specific challenges that you notice? Like, yes, you've got systems to implement, but what are some of the contextual things that are in their world that you've also had to take into account?
So that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. When we talk about the sorts of things that they're grappling with, a lot of the time it is they don't have a very big tech budget. So we've worked with some retailers who are in phases of their growth where they've invested pretty heavily in technology,
Yeah,
right? So, and that's a really nice place to be because it makes it easy. The money is there to support the projects. But then when you're working with perhaps smaller enterprises or people who are not trading as well,
mm,
you're really trying to get value, and this is one of the things that we focus on when we first engage with clients, is trying to get value out of their existing systems as much as moving to new things.
right,
And when you talk about some of the pressures that they're under, depending on the business, they might be dealing with different time zones, cultures,
right,
supply chains, you know, rules and regulations in different countries that also impact the way that they need to work.
right.
They might be dealing with suppliers who are very sophisticated and who have, a manual this big to deal with them. And then on the other hand, also be dealing with suppliers who are like little startups in somebody's back garage. So
Right.
trying to absorb those different relationships inside how they build out their systems is actually, it's quite tricky because you don't want to overcomplicate or over engineer something to
Yeah,
handle the big guns of the world, but then to leave out all the little exciting indie, new things that are coming up. So
yeah.
it is a real balancing act.
Yeah. So the things like, I'm guessing you've got the, Amazons of the world that have got the blueprint on, speed to market and how to, the logistics and these sort of benchmarks that customers are sort of used to. And so these other, competing retailers trying to keep up with, and then pressure on sustainability and this whole, particularly in fashion, there's a lot of, I'm noticing a few of these brands bringing in ways to resell or engage
Mhm.
clients to resell, how they resell, and creating communities and all that sort
I'm
of thing
really
with brand
enjoying seeing some
loyalty.
of that come
Yeah,
through, Jane. I'm really delighted to see some of those tech innovations, and I've seen
mm,
recently too some on websites we're starting to see people actually estimate the resale value of the product before you've even bought it,
right.
and those kinds of things. How retailers get involved and how far to be involved in those kind of secondary markets is actually like, that's a tricky thing too, because if you're
Yes.
endorsing that secondary sale, then it needs to be of a certain quality and standard that people have come to expect from your brand. So
Right.
that in itself is also a challenge. Like, it's definitely one of the things that people are grappling with at the moment. Amazon are a great topic. They are now moving from being able to fulfill anything via subscription. They're now buying their own planes and ships. They'll be moving into logistics very soon, or
Right.
are in the process of moving into logistics, and we'll be seeing them challenge shipping companies pretty soon.
Wow. So
Mm.
much change happening. Uh,
Yeah,
so um, I'm thinking about for those who are, because you've made this move, it's an interesting journey from coming out of working in the fashion industry, working in a consulting practice that supports retailers, having taken on someone else's brand, and now, evolving it and being able to really make it your own. You've been
yeah,
able to sort of, I'm guessing, come from some of the clients that you've inherited through that process, plus creating your own. What have
yep.
been some of the biggest learnings that you've had in that journey and starting to adopt it and really make it your own?
So I said earlier, there are so many learnings, and we're continually learning. There's always more learning. So in the last year, there have been huge amounts of people putting energy into learning more about AI and all that sort of stuff. But if I just dial it back to some more sort of, I don't know, some more self-focused things, perhaps.
Yeah.
Um, I think that I think that one of the things that I've, had to perhaps learn the hard way is becoming more comfortable with the selling process, or
Right.
seeing sales as not ugly, perhaps.
Right.
I know that sounds
Yes.
silly, but coming from retail where you are actually selling, but you're not selling yourself. And so
Mhm.
I get really uncomfortable with people who overpromise. Really hate the experience of disappointing customers,
Mm,
and I don't like the experience myself of being disappointed by, a big promise that doesn't deliver.
mm.
So I think that I've always been very careful and measured about what it is that I'm prepared to promise, and I'm always dialing back other people's language, going, no, not, sort of like trying to make it sort of more realistic about what it is that we're doing. But I think perhaps feeling a bit more comfortable with some of those bigger words.
Yeah.
I guess that's perhaps been something that I've had to really work on.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, just on that too, I think another one of the things that I was reflecting on about that is managing myself better and not overdoing delivery. So
Right.
not becoming so invested and so in it with the client that you're sort of basically exhausting yourself. Like,
Okay.
so not to not deliver value for, still focused on delivering value for the client, but also sort of managing myself better and making sure that I've still got the energy for the whole journey, rather
Right.
than kind of going too hard at the beginning. So
Yes.
that one's definitely been a big lesson. And
Right.
also, I guess I would add to that, sort of then being able to rely on other people and, sort of look to other people's strengths and go, well, where do I need help in my team?
Right.
So who else can work with, who else can bring something that I don't have?
Right. It's
Yeah.
hard, isn't it, when you're so probably self-sufficient. You've been self-sufficient for a long time, but as you grow, the hours don't grow in the day with you, unfortunately.
No, there are no more hours in the day
No.
available, and I think I have become more valuing, I think, of things like rest and stepping away too, in that I have better energy to give to the things that are ahead of me if I
Yes.
am well rested, or if I've had some time to reflect and process and think and
Yes.
that sort of stuff. So I have, that has definitely also been a learning,
Right.
and continues to be a learning. I think it's one
Yeah.
of those things that comes in peaks and troughs where,
Yeah.
there are times where you're really intensely into something, and then, but also allowing myself that space when it's
Right.
not really intense to go, actually, it's okay that it's not really intense.
Right.
You can take a slightly slower pace and get some
Yes.
other things done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many other things happening in your life, isn't there? Like, and it's hard when you're a solo operator, you haven't got a big team. So you have to be really discerning in your time and your choices, don't you?
It's I have this little quote that has been sitting in front of me. I don't know whether
Right.
you're up for this, but I have this one. It says, I'm not sure if you can see that. It's
Yep.
not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm doing it backwards because
That's
I'm looking
okay.
at the
No, I
thing.
can see
But
it.
that's a Seneca one, and I thought it came out of I did a bunch of quote cards for a session that I did with a client, and I picked that one up, and I was like, "That's a good one to have right in front of
I like it.
you. Don't get lost. Stay where you're supposed to be."
So in that case then, Leonie, for this in this podcast, as you know, for those who might be listening to it, there are often women who are either on this journey at a similar sort of stage to you or thinking about doing this, or perhaps they've had the practice for a while. What based on the learnings, or what advice would you give them if you were able to talk to them and say, here's some of the things you've learned, but what advice would you have for them with growing their practice?
So, I think just on myself, like thinking about myself,
Yeah,
staying really close to the measures.
right.
I have a tendency, and I know this is not you because you're very good at the measures, but
Yeah.
I have a tendency to just follow the passion and the excitement and believe that the numbers will work out for themselves. So
Right.
I need to remind myself. So if there are other people out there like me who are just happy to just barrel along with what they're enjoying, it is also important to review the numbers. You don't have to be in them all the time, but set aside some time to be closely acquainted with what's going on in your business and make time to plan ahead.
Right.
I think the other sort of one of the lessons that I have apart from alongside of that is the amount of time that I used to spend avoiding doing my tax. And
Okay. Yes.
actually, when I sat down and did it, it took a lot less time than the amount of time I spent in my head avoiding
Right.
it.
It's taking up your energy.
So, so I think that facing into the things that you really don't want to do and just trying to, take them one step at a time is definitely something that I would sort of put out there as an idea to explore for people who are also on this path.
Yes.
I think the other thing the other thing that serves me well is that I reflect on what I've done sort of when I get to the end of a week or a project or an engagement or a session or a workshop with a client. I'm often sort of spending time after that going, okay, well, how did that go and what could I do better? And
Right.
looking at what am I bringing to the situation that I can control, right? So, because you can't always control what other people are doing, but to
Yes.
be self-aware enough to look and go, well, what am I? Why am I upset about that?
Yeah.
Why does that matter to me? And sort of to consistently work on that emotional regulation and self-awareness that allows you to be. I always tell consultants who work with me that you need to be the calmest person in the room, and part of that is self-knowledge, I think.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. What great advice and great tips. And I'm just noticing also something on your shelf behind you, Leonie. Does that happen to be a book by any chance?
Aha, yes, Jane. I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked. So this arrived just a couple of days ago. So this is my first book, and big thank you to you for helping me get there.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
say my first book, even though I didn't think I was going to write a book, because once I was into it, I was kind of into it.
Isn't that amazing? I often say when
Yeah.
you're writing a book, I think you're writing 2 or 3 others at the same time.
Well, this is a
All the
really good
ideas.
point.
Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting is over the weekend, I was listening to some podcasts that have sort of given me another layer of the stuff of what I've been writing about, thinking about different systems and building out decision making and critical thinking ways of working that sit alongside some of the interpersonal and intrapersonal elements of
Right.
collaborative teams. So, yeah, there's there's more. There's always more.
There's more. So tell us about the book. It's Momentum, yes? And
Yes,
what's the
Momentum
subtitle
is the
again?
name of the book.
Yep.
And it's really all about, I'm doing that terribly, sorry. It's really it's about sort of, this is the way I describe what it is that we do with businesses. We're always looking to build alignment, action and accountability in the project teams that we work with.
Right.
And that sort of constant, I guess you would say, constantly touching on all of those elements in a
Yes.
project starts to build momentum in a team and starts to build momentum in a project. Like you were saying before about success, I think in order to be successful, you need to have a certain level of that, like there needs to be a massive, shift in terms of teamwork for most people. And surprisingly, there are still many businesses where cross-functional working and collaborative practices are not very well evolved.
Right.
I'm sure you would see this in your work too, in that the people's capacity to sort of get into their own little part of the world and just work with the part that they can control, it
Yes.
it's very it ends up, it doesn't serve a business well. The size of businesses that we're working with, they need to be able to also pull themselves out of their own functional areas and look across the business and work with other team members on things that are bigger than just they can control or that somebody else can control in their department. So it's a really a big part of getting those change projects over the line is developing ways of working cross-functionally.
Right. So not
Mm.
just within that team, but how they're interacting with the wider business.
Yeah, and
Yep.
so often that these sorts of projects, big change projects, they're complicated. They've got lots of people and departments involved. They touch lots of different parts of the business. They require people from outside the business to be involved and to partner with them. There's plenty going on in terms of complexity of communication and capability. So
Yep.
it yeah, so it really, the book is really about the sort of methods and techniques that we use as we work with businesses to help them develop their own internal capability around, building teams that are cross-functional.
Right. It's a huge milestone, Leonie. I love what you're saying about you said the alignment, did you say the
Action.
alignment, the action,
Yep.
and the accountability, and trying to get those things to work. I think that's just so true. And, I see it in the work you do all the time. I know your obsession around getting this momentum and keeping things moving and being able to get it completed and done. A book
Mm.
project in itself is the epitome of that. So,
It's a really good point, Jane. And it did need a team. It needed a team of people, and you were definitely part of that team. And I'm very grateful to you and to the editor and the proofreader and the designer and all of those people. There were so many people that I had no idea were involved in making a book come to life.
oh, it's so good to get all that incredible expertise and knowledge in your head and to be able to get it down and allow your expertise to travel. It can end up anywhere.
It it can. I might even rethink some of it.
Well, the beauty of it, there's always addition two that you can do. There's always permission to evolve and update, and that's
Exactly.
great.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's my sort of, I guess, in a way, life philosophy, in that nothing is ever stagnant. It never stays the same.
No. Well, you've got a really powerful, I love your expertise, Leonie, and just how specific it is, and not just projects, but
retail projects. And I think you're a real inspiration for those who are thinking, but I'm too specialized, or I'm too niche, or, how can I possibly go out and help people? Because, nobody, who am I? Why would I have anything else to add? People can Google this stuff. But I think you're such a great example of somebody who's got incredible deep expertise and knowledge, great stories, examples, case studies. That you've got all the ways to paint the picture, and to make a story come to life, but to make it a really easy way to understand and to be able to apply some really practical things, as well as deeply insightful and evidence-based things that to be able to apply it. So, the power of your book now to be able to put that out and get it in front of the right people is just so exciting. So I think it's super inspiring to be able to say, and just such a really specific, powerful book that is so unique. So for those who want to perhaps go and have a look at your book, where I know it's only just been printed, you might be going, oh, that's a good question. I don't know where it'll be.
It is. I am working on it, Jane. Thank you very much. It is in the process of
Yes.
being put up on our website. So that's 6r.com.au. Under the resources section, there'll be a book page, and it'll be available on Amazon and Booktopia as well.
Right.
However, it's always nicer if you can get one directly from the author.
And they might, if they ask nicely, you might even sign it for them, I'm guessing.
I could be persuaded, Jane. I'm pretty sure I could.
Oh, look, Leonie, it's been fantastic to catch up with you today. I love what you've said about being able to find space. What I'm taking away from our conversation today is, knowing your expertise, but knowing your way of doing it and finding your way. And I love that you've gone, actually, I found really what works for me is how much the insight you've had about how space works for you and reflective practice, and how critical that is in terms of your success and your growth, and being able to even achieve being able to get a book done. It takes a lot of thinking and a lot of time to really, think through that expertise. So the self-management I'm really taking away today. I love your Seneca quote around the time. And can you share that with us again? Can you just hold it up on the screen?
Sure.
I just love that. I want to get, it's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. So to really optimize that time, make the most of the time that we have. But I love what you said about that self-management and finding ways to get space to recover and get rest. And congratulations on your book. What a huge milestone. I know how much this means to you. So for those who want to go and have a look, so jump on Leonie. I'll put the links on the website as well.
Thank you, Jane.
So it's 6rretail.com.au. And can people, if they want to connect with you, are they best to jump on somewhere like LinkedIn as well?
LinkedIn? Yeah. LinkedIn is just 6r.com.au, Jane.
6R?
So you don't need retail.
Sorry, 6r.com.au. I always have retail in my head. 6r.
Well, it is retail, but the domain is just 6r, which I quite like because it's very short.
Yeah, it's very short. I like it. All right. So for those, if you're listening, jump onto Leonie's website, order the fabulous book, which is Momentum, and ask her nicely and she'll sign it for you possibly. And we can't wait to see you write the next one. No pressure.
Thanks, Jane. No pressure. I think we enjoyed this one for a moment, but yeah, maybe there's another one in me.
That's great. I can't wait to see and hear more how you go with it. I think it's going to do really well.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right.
Great to talk to you.
You too.